All right, today is Monday, October 26th, 2020. This is the Kubernetes CSI implementation meeting. So our main usual agenda is to go down our release statuses and then any miscellaneous topics. So let's go through 119 first. We're mostly fixing up some documentation and also fixing up the CI as well. I think, Xing, I saw a docs PR from you. Is that right?
I have two PRs, one for House Monitor, one for Snapshot Webhook. So I think there is one PR that Kathy is working on will be updating the Snapshot controller doc because there are like
Okay.
more docs. So that one I'm not changing, but I'm changing the rest of them. And also added the webhook section.
Okay.
Just a few links
Awesome.
to be updated, in the Snapshot controller one.
All right, sounds good. Cool. I'll try to take a look soon. Thank you. The next thing is the patch releases for the metrics fix. That has the patch releases have been cut, and actually, yeah, I think Ben noted last week that they are updated in Quay. So like we cut a 3.0.1 and a 2.2.1. And they both show up in Quay. I'm having troubles actually pulling the images and pushing them to GCR, but I think that's a problem on my desktop. Maybe something's weird. So I'm gonna continue to play around and see if I can fix this. So that is that. I think, let's see, update kind. Patrick, I think your change merged, but we just need to update the host path driver in order to fix the CI.
That's correct, yeah. I have
Okay.
if it docs, I have a few comments on how we might streamline the process a little bit. So we can talk about that later.
Okay, sounds good. I just LGTM the host path one, so I think probably today we should have this one resolved, and the test should be looking good. I think that update also updates the snapshot controller, so we'll be testing the latest snapshot controller as well. So these two, yeah.
Okay, now that you've mentioned it, so the current round of CSI release tools updates that didn't yet have the updated kind version. I need to trigger another round of PRs using the squash method, and hopefully that now will show up as an incremental change of the release tools directory. I'd like to get the current round of PRs merged first, because otherwise I basically need to do some manual work, either deleting them, because my script that I'm using doesn't handle updating an existing PR.
Okay, so that's fine.
But we can talk about that later. So just
okay, sounds good.
Warning, there's still more work needed.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. All right, and then the last thing is the actual sidecar releases. I think we just need the CSI proxy image building is broken. I need to go poke Jing on that and get that resolved. So that's it for 119. Moving on to 120. We have a couple PRs out in progress. Ronick has a change to add a performance benchmarking test. I think, is this just waiting on me to review? Well, I guess it looks like some jobs might be failing, so that might need to be resolved first. Okay, so this might still be pending some work. Next up is fixing the race condition between node unstage and delete volume. This is something that I discussed with Psychot and Jing, and I think they're gonna try to take a look at this week. I don't know if we might need to schedule a discussion about this to resolve it or not. But yeah, hopefully some progress will be made this week. This PR, I think the author is sort of missing, so I think Kamat said Christian, were you
Yes.
going to take over this?
Yes. I was going
Cool.
to try and take over that one since I have a related issue.
Awesome. All right. Have you been able to make any progress on this?
Not as of yet. Friday was
Okay.
rather unproductive, so I'm hoping to do it
No
this
problem.
week.
All right. Thank you very much. Next up is this PR. I think last update was Jing had some comments and we're waiting for the author to resolve them. So I think that still isn't outstanding. And then this one, I think also there's some outstanding comments that Andy needs to resolve. I think he was on vacation last week, but he should be back this week. So this should hopefully make some progress. Next up is volume permission handling. Is Hamat here? No, okay. I think last week we kind of were just figuring out assignments and who was going to work on what. So I don't think there's been any progress in that area. Christian, you've been working on the CSI driver work. Do you have an update on that?
Yeah, so I responded to your comments on the PR on Friday, and then I updated it again this morning. But the end-to-end test should be completely finished. It needs to review. I saw that you signed a new reviewer for that last week. And then for relaxing validation, I have a couple of open questions to you on that PR.
Okay, sounds good. Maybe we can discuss after the meeting on those open questions.
Sounds good to me.
All right, thank you. Next is volume snapshots.
So yeah, so I have updated change the API version PR. If you can take a look. And also we have a few tests submitted. So I think Mona has submitted test for the secrets, and Runa submitted PR for the finalizers. So I started reviewing them. Yeah, I think. Oh, I want to ask you. So the test needs to. We need to have an image, right? I forgot how I thought last time, did we cut like some RC image and use that for the E2E test early before? We need something in tree?
Yeah, we did. Do any of these tests actually depend on things that are not there?
No, they don't. Those are testing exist. So tests don't depend on them.
Okay. I guess the only update that we need to do is update to use the V1 API. Is that right?
So yeah, so I have, that's the in-tree change, right? So I have that one.
Mm-hmm.
Are you
Okay.
saying the test needs to be changed to use V1 as well? Okay. Is that?
Possibly. In which case do we need a new image?
Yeah,
Yes.
then we do need to change. So
yeah, I think this is gonna get complicated because we only have our RCs in staging now, and then staging images get deleted after 30 days. So I think what that basically means is our in-tree CI can't use staging images anymore. So we're gonna have to figure out maybe like if the timing doesn't work out right, maybe we need to update the E2Es to use V1 in the next release. Since we have like a chicken and egg problem, we like released the sidecar after Kubernetes, and it gets complicated.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. If that's the only way, then yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing we can do though in the meantime is like we can cut an RC. And we can have like a work in progress PR that tests against the RC, so we can see it's working.
Okay, working.
But then we don't actually submit it until after we cut the official image.
Okay, but how can we use those images? I'm still not. I'm not sure how. I thought we can't really use the RC images for testing anymore, right? Even if
yeah, I mean, so we can use them temporarily, like in the PR, just to demonstrate that the test still pass.
Okay.
But like we don't actually submit it until we have the official image.
Okay.
What I still wanted to look into a periodic job that refreshes those images that are only in the staging area. I haven't done it yet, but it seems that this should be doable with Pro. And
yes.
then even the images that we don't publish would still remain in the staging area as long as we run this periodic check. That's at least one way of doing it.
Yeah, I guess we can, so like for periodically updating things, like I think updating Canary makes sense. But then when it comes to like RCs, I guess we don't want to.
That is more problematic. Yeah,
yeah.
I agree on that. We might still, I don't know, pull them and push them again, something like that. I don't know whether that resets the timer.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think I think in the ideal case, like the actual E2E tests would be outside of the Kubernetes repo so that we can update it independently of Kubernetes. I think that's something Test Infra is working on. They're like slowly trying to move pieces of the E2E out of Kubernetes, but it's still a work in progress.
Actually, there has been a counter proposal to just keep it in Kubernetes entirely. So this thing that I started with moving the E2E test framework into staging, even that has kind of been canceled. It's no longer being pursued. Because the impression was, I guess, that it's too much work to actually clean it up. And therefore, the status quo has to be acceptable. And anyone who wants to use E2E testing outside of Kubernetes is kind of getting advised to not even use the existing framework and just write something from scratch. That has been the latest proposal. I do not fully agree. I still have the reasons for reusing that framework. How, even if it's flawed, it still makes sense for people who want to use the existing tests. I certainly fall into that category, so I'll continue to use it. Or who just wants to use the same thing when working on Kubernetes and his own project. So I think those are still valid. But
I wonder if like it would be interesting. So Patrick, you added the external.go stuff to the Kubernetes E2E. I wonder if like some future model could be like we host our own E2E in Kubernetes CSI, and we basically move that external.go to our CSI repo, and we can import the test suites from Kubernetes, but the actual binary and stuff is produced from our repo. And then that also allows us to add more test cases for things that are not part of Kubernetes. So like we potentially could host snapshot tests in our own repo, and we just combine it with the in-tree suites.
That would certainly be possible. It's kind of a model that how we are using the E2E framework in PMM CSI. We do import the existing tests, we add our own ones. So that model certainly works. It's just a question of whether we want to do that and where we do it.
Yeah, that might makes sense as we continue like working on more features that are out of tree, and doesn't really make sense to actually put the tests in Kubernetes, in the Kubernetes repo. All right. Anyway, that's a long-winded answer to we'll have to figure something out.
So other than that, I think the metrics work. I think Grant is working on. He said he will submit PR today or tomorrow. So Chris is working on the stress test, right?
Yeah, so I think he's gonna continue working on it this week. So I'm hoping by the end of this week he should have something.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Next is data populators.
Hello?
Yep.
Hello? Okay, sorry, I've been having major audio problems. Like I missed the first 10 minutes of the meeting because it wasn't working. No updates on data populators. We're going to meet again tomorrow and go into detail on some other things, but I haven't had time to iterate on the CAP based on last week's information yet. So
All right, no
hopefully
problem.
something by Wednesday.
Awesome.
Hey Ben, when you are using the validation webhook, are you testing that with Kubernetes 1.19 or earlier version?
Either 119 or master. I rarely go back earlier than the latest stable release.
Okay.
But we agreed last week to can the validation.
Yeah, I'm asking because I'm trying this and seeing some strange errors. So I don't know if it's because 1.19 has a new requirement for the certificate to be it has to be like V1, but in our code it's actually V1 beta 1. So I don't know if it's
the certificate object. You mean when you get Kubernetes to sign your certificate?
Right.
See, I didn't use. I saw that the sample in the Snapshotter code was based on somebody else's sample for how to build a webhook, and I didn't really like that sample, and so I did it differently.
Oh, okay.
In fact, I have all my own PKI for my own Kubernetes distribution, and so doing another certificate was not a big deal based on the way I set up my clusters. So I don't know. I can, if you have problems, I can probably help you sort them out, because I did dig really deep into that, how you set up the webhook and how you get all the certificates going.
Okay, maybe I'll pay you offline.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've been using Cert Manager, that project, to generate self-signed certificates.
Okay.
But I didn't actually set up Cert Manager myself. It was already set up in my cluster.
Okay.
All right, cool. Thank you for the update. We're gonna skip over expansion since Hamon's not here. Volume health.
Yeah, so I think we're testing the PR on adding voting house to the the host pass driver. I think the person working on this find out that get volumes or the list volumes actually is not implemented there, so he said he needs to implement that one first. So it's a status.
All right, thank you very much. And then I guess the last stuff is, Patrick, you have a number of items.
Yeah, I wonder whether we should track them as in progress, because I'm not really actively working on them for 120. Status is pretty much the same. I was on vacation last week. I need to get the API discussion going again about CSI ephemeral volumes and generic ephemeral volumes. I'll probably try to set up a meeting, I don't know, next week or so, depending on when people are available. So that's the next step.
Okay, sounds good to me. All right, and then you have a number of items in the agenda doc.
Yeah, that's true. First one is basically a request for comments. I ran scale testing with our PMM CSI driver, and that has the PMM CSI driver available basically with topology with one topology entry per node. And I found that for immediate binding, the topology information basically listed all nodes, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We added strict topology a while back for local storage, but that was only for late binding. And it's currently ignored for immediate binding volumes. I was wondering whether the right solution in external provisioner would be to extend the meaning of that flag. And I have that implemented in that PR. It's basically a one-line if check at one place for the existing Boolean, or whether for backwards compatibility reasons, we need to add another command line argument.
I think it makes sense. I'll take a deeper look at this one.
Yeah, okay. Then the next point is CSI release tools update. So we touched on that already briefly. I triggered a round of PRs with the squash method, and some of them have been lingering for a while. And I wonder how we can improve our process here to make those updates go through a little bit faster.
I thought I approved the one for the house monitor. Is it still there? I'll check and prove it.
I think I just approved it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we had one technical issue with PRs that didn't actually touch any files, but that should be a one-time thing. In general, there should be updates. Otherwise, the PR doesn't get created. I could perhaps try to auto-assign these PRs to someone. Would that help, or should I manually ping people? I'm really asking for opinion.
I think
what
there's
works
a
best
general.
for you guys?
There's a general, I think, problem in that just a lot of the reviewers become inactive after a while, or things fall off the radar. So I think we haven't really, like in Kubernetes, we haven't really been able to find a great solution other than like just people pinging people. But I wonder for like the CSI release tools changes in particular, I wonder if we can somehow get these to merge without approval, just like automatically. Because I know in the test infra repo, they update the Kubekins image version like every week or something like that. And I imagine that just goes through and it gets updated by a bot and no one has to actually LGTM the change. Like, I wonder if we can set up some cron job or something like that to be able to get this done automatically.
I can ask around whether that's possible. In general, I agree. These PRs never should really need a review. The only thing that a maintainer might want to do is look at whether they want to change now, like in the cases where the update, say, updates for Go version, you're just about to do a release or something like that. That might happen. But in general, the expectation is that it should just go through.
Yeah, like I can imagine like if we can have set up some sort of job to automatically update this and merge it, if assuming like, tests don't fail, then I think that makes sense.
Yeah, even submitting the PRs could be automated. That's actually what the open issue is about. We just never got to a good solution for interacting, I think, with GitHub, because it does depend on a GitHub access token, and that's kind of personal. So we would need to set up some robot that has permission to create PRs, and then it even needs to have more permissions than other developers, because it also needs to automatically merge its own PR. So yeah, and in the meantime, we do have a current setup which is running the script manually and then people just have to LGDM.
Yeah, I can imagine like we can take that script, once we get that script working, then we can, put that script into a cron job or something to do it. But we just have to figure out the permissions. So maybe I would say next steps is check with Test Infra on how they update the Kubekins version today.
Yeah, okay. The issue is not so much that I need to ping people, but it also has the implementation that I mentioned earlier. I can't run the script again because it will fail for those repos where there is a pending pull request. That's why I'd like to see those merged. Besides, of course, getting the change in, it also blocks other repos, or it makes my work a little bit harder because I need to manually close PRs that people already might have looked at. Or so, yeah, the sooner we can get those merged, the better for everyone, and with as little work as possible.
Yeah, I think I went ahead this morning and LGTM'd all of them, so they should be good to go.
Yeah. Okay. The next one is a bit larger. That also came out of my work on scaling testing of volume creation. So I noticed that volume creation was blocked by rate limiting in the PV controller. I figured out that I can set this annotation volume beta Kubernetes IO storage provisioner already when creating the PVC, and then at least the create volume calls went through a lot faster. And I was wondering whether that is allowed, not allowed, or just an undocumented feature. My opinion is that it actually is part of the external Kubernetes API, because that's how Kubernetes communicates with external provisioners. It's perhaps not intended that someone who creates a PVC sets it directly, but it's currently possible.
Yeah, I would say like there's this problem where everything in the Kubernetes API is public, even when you intend some things to only be consumed by controllers. The sort of guidance we've been trying to do is if it's a user-facing thing, it should be a field. If it's like an internal system thing, then maybe it can be an annotation. But it's not really set in stone. I think the main concern I have about this is that currently today when we bind, we offer this behavior that if you pre-create a volume first, we will match it to those first before we try to do dynamic provisioning. So if you set this automatically, that will bypass that completely.
Yeah, I came to the same conclusion, but it still might make sense depending on what the user is expecting. So perhaps I wouldn't set it by default, not even for generic ephemeral volumes, but it might be worthwhile to document that, especially for the generic ephemeral volumes case where it's kind of expected that the volume gets provisioned anew each time.
You don't have to. So like actually you can use generic ephemeral volumes with the current local PVs that are pre-provisioned, and it works almost the same way as dynamic provisioning.
Yeah, you're right. I guess it then really depends on the use case. Either way, I think leaving it to the user as a hint or a tip that if they want to speed up this, they can do that, may be worthwhile. But even then, I think this annotation goes beyond internal usage, because it is the communication path between the PV controller and an external provisioner. So I think it is part of the Kubernetes API and not just something.
It is. Like annotations are part of the Kubernetes API, and we can't get rid of them or change them. That would break backwards compatibility.
Yeah. So that's the other part of my question here, and that long bullet item. Should we actually move the documentation or the definition of those annotations from the internal Kubernetes code where it currently exists and move that into the API?
Potentially. We would probably not keep the beta.
That is then where it gets tricky. Is it GA or?
Yes, this
So
is
we
all
have,
GA feature, but we just never updated it
so we
because
have a
no
GA
one.
feature that has a beta name in it, and we can't
Yes.
change it. That's then, I guess, simply what we have to live with.
Well, no, we can add a new GA annotation, but we have to maintain compatibility with the beta annotation too.
So
So
you
we have to
basically
support both.
you have to support both forever. Then
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
So ideally, if we could rewrite this whole feature from scratch, I would want to follow the way that we did the Snapshots API, where you actually have to explicitly say whether or not you want something dynamically provisioned or it's something, or you want to use a specific volume. And you have to actually opt into that behavior.
Yeah, might make more sense, but I guess the ship has sailed on that one. So the question is now really, do we just document? I hesitate to call it mess, but do we document the current status officially, or do we keep it as it is now, where external provisioner or the CSI provisioner library has a copy of that label, that annotation name, and Kubernetes eternally does it, or do? I think it would make sense to just move it to the API, even if it exposes our dirty laundry in a way.
I think we just need to be careful that if we actually do document it and people do start using it and depending on it, we need to make sure there aren't any unintended consequences of that.
Yeah, but that's not different from people discovering that it exists and then using it. So it might lead to additional questions like, where's the cap that documents that? And what in general is the documentation of that API? I think the comments on the annotations, they were fairly useful, but I must admit that I only discovered them after explicitly searching for them, I could not find, for example, a cap or a design document that describes how all of that works.
Oh yeah, I think that's all lost in history, maybe.
Yeah. So I wonder whether I dare proposing a PR with the API change, because of it, I think that inevitably will lead to additional questions and asks for more documentation. Okay.
Yeah, this is definitely this is pretty old territory. I think this logic was added very, very early, like before 1.6, maybe in like 1.4 or something. So I think definitely if we want to sort of, I think updating it and improving the documentation is good. It's just, it might be a little more work because we might need to better document everything in general.
Yeah. Okay. Well, sometime, if there's nothing else going on. Thanks. I think that covers it.
Awesome.
But no, there's one more aspect. So if we agree that setting this storage provisioner annotation directly when creating a PVC makes sense, at least for some users, then we also need to fix the PV controller, because currently, if you do that, you run into that situation that I had where it sees the PV but hasn't seen the PVC yet, and then it deletes the PV or triggers PV deletion. I think that, given what we discussed, that this is formally part of the API and might be used even if it's not currently documented, I think we should fix that behavior in the PV controller.
I think that makes sense. I think you can basically take the check that's there already, but move it, change the conditions.
Yeah, it's just removing one if check, and I'm not even sure why the if check is there. because I don't exactly understand why it was added for binding, but I think the code itself makes sense. It just needs to a little bit more broadly applied, and then it works. Okay, I'll prepare a PR for that, and I'll mark it as a bug fix because I think that's what it is.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, thanks.
All right, cool. Thanks for investigating all this. Any other topics? All right, then we'll end for today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.